Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Megan, and I'm the Marketing Director with Concierge Pediatrics. And on behalf of Concierge Pediatrics, welcome to tonight's webinar. Tonight, we're honored to be led in this discussion by Spenser Lipton. If you haven't met Spenser yet, she is a pediatric sleep consultant and founder of mysleepfriend. She offers preferred pricing for Concierge Pediatrics members and operates out of our Roslyn office, and she has virtual office hours. Tonight, we're here to talk about Sleep 101 for little ones ages 1 to 5 years old. Spenser will share some expert insights, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. If you look at the bottom toolbar of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button where you can go ahead and ask questions throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer them, mostly during the Q&A portion, but Spenser might ask while she's presenting if it makes sense for that moment. And with that, I'll hand it off to Spenser.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Concierge Pediatrics, for having me. And thank you all for joining. Very excited to be chatting with you. Last night, I spent an hour talking to parents about their baby 0 to 1. So, very excited to be focusing on children ages 1 to 5 tonight. I love working with children this age. It is challenging, as we all know, as toddler parents, but we really use their newfound verbal and understanding skills to our advantage. And tonight I'm going to talk you through how we get sleep to a better place for all of you. So, this is just a little agenda of what we will be talking about, just so you have a little insight and you can see how the night will flow. But as Megan said, if there's anything that you want to ask, please drop it into the Q&A and we will be sure to get to it. So let's get started. As you all now know, I'm Spenser, a certified pediatric sleep consultant. I have two boys, Luke, who's 4, and Ryan, who is 2. I live on Long Island, so very close to the Concierge Pediatrics in Roslyn. You can call me my sleep friend. My sleep friend was founded in summer of 2023. The reason I named it my sleep friend was because first, all of my friends would ask me questions about baby sleep, toddler sleep, even before I was a sleep consultant. That's what they would refer to me as. Let me ask my sleep friend. But the other reason is because I found during this time when you're exhausted, you're parenting little ones, you really need that friend to be there to help you. And that's what I am. So let's get started. Sleep training, what is it and how do you do it? So maybe you sleep trained when your child was younger than 1. Maybe you didn't for whatever reason. Maybe it didn't feel right. Maybe your baby was sleeping beautifully and there was no reason to go through any of that process. But now, if you're here, you're probably experiencing some issues. So, what is sleep training? Sleep training is the practice of teaching your child or baby to fall asleep and stay asleep independently, without any sleep props, without any of our assistance. They do this all on their own. There are a lot of misconceptions around sleep training and a lot of negative connotations with it too. You've probably heard people say things like letting our child cry or cry it out, or, with babies that you can't feed them at all at night. These things are simply not true. Sleep training, like I said, is just simply teaching something to our children. So there's really nothing to be afraid of other than some initial discomfort in hearing your child cry and protest at learning something new. There is nothing traumatic. There is nothing that's going to cause any secure attachment issues between you and your child. There are really no actual findings that this is true in any way. If anything, sleep training is really, really valuable to children because sleep is the foundation for so much. We need good sleep to be healthy, strong individuals. And us as parents, we need to sleep well in order to take care of our children. So, good sleep is good for everyone. How sleep training changes from baby to toddlerhood and older children. So, I do typically practice very similar methods. If our child is in a bed versus a crib, that may differ. But I want to touch on some of the methods and how those things change. If you've done sleep training prior, but you're here now and want to know how do I tackle this with an older child, we're going to get into that. So, like I said at the beginning, we are going to be using our children's understanding and verbal skills to our advantage when we're teaching them. With a baby, we're setting them up for a certain, successful scenario, but they're very much teaching themselves. When we have a toddler, an older child, we can talk to them. Even if they can't fully communicate back to us, their level of understanding is so much higher. So if you have a verbal 1.5-year-old plus, what we're going to do is do a lot of preparation. So the first thing that I do is a family meeting, and this can be super short if you have a 1.5-year-old, 2-year-old, but if you have like a 2.5 plus, or you have a very verbal child who understands what you're explaining to them really well, you're going to have this family meeting and explain to them that sleep is going to look different. And, you can be super, positive and patient during this. It doesn't have to be something that sounds like a punishment. We just want them to take it seriously because it is serious. Sleep is something that's important, and it's not something that we're going to, sacrifice anymore. So when we sit them down, you sit on one side of the table, mom and dad, parents on one side, and then the child on the other. You sit them down and you say, sleep is not something that's a priority right now, and we're all going to work together to make it a priority. And, if you have an older child, you can talk about this in a little more detail and talk about some things that we've been experiencing. If you have a younger child, you can just move on to the next step. The next step is regardless of age where we're going to be spending the most time, and that is role playing. So, what you're going to do is there's a couple different ways to do it. You can do standard role playing where your child plays themselves, you play yourself, and you go through all the motions of the bedtime routine, of them being in their room on their own, of how you're going to do the actual sleep training method, what it looks like in the middle of the night if they wake up, what it looks like early in the morning if they wake up. Show them the do's and don'ts. If your child has some anxiety around sleep, then it probably makes sense to do another one of the role playing options. And that is either reverse role play, where you play them and they play you, which they also think is really funny because you'll be climbing into their crib or bed and they think it's fun to play mom or dad. And then you also have the opportunity to talk through the actions that you're doing as you're playing your child. The other option, which I also really like, is to model it with a doll or stuffed animal that your child loves. So you can put that doll down to sleep together. You can talk through what you're doing with your child. When you leave the room with your child and say, "Oh, I think I hear Bear crying, but Bear knows that he needs to fall asleep on his own. So we're going to let him be. And he knows that if he's crying, mom or dad will come check." And then you can do the check-in with them. And that brings us to the last step, and that is celebrating. If our children and when our children are successful, we want to celebrate with them and show them that what they did was amazing. So, some ways, of course, to do that are, by yourselves in the morning when you wake up, have a dance party, tell their teachers when you drop them off at school. FaceTime with family members and get other people excited. They'll be so proud of themselves, and it really helps accelerate the process. So, regardless of what sleep training method you decide, doing this preparation is really key to making this successful. In terms of sleep training methods, let's talk through a few of them. So, we'll go from the most accelerated to what you might call the most gentle. So, and I will tell you my honest opinions on them as well. So, there's the term cried out, which is the proper term for the extinction method. That's what it's actually called. And that is the practice of closing the door and not coming back until morning. So, you're not going in for check ins, you're not present in the room. You're giving your child space to learn this on their own. This is the phrase where letting them cry often comes in, but we're not letting them cry. There's not a negative association, even though it does feel really hard. And it can be too extreme for some parents, and that's absolutely okay. That's why there's other options. But there's nothing wrong with it. If that's your choice and your parenting decision, it's absolutely acceptable. And that could be doable if your child is in a crib or in a bed, because they are either staying in their crib or their whole room becomes a crib and it's safety proofed. Everything is bolted to the walls. There's nothing that they can climb up to and grab that would be unsafe. Their whole room becomes their crib. So if you're closing the door and not coming back, think of it like a giant crib. If you were comfortable letting your child be in their crib on their own, then you should also feel comfortable letting them be in their room on their own. So that's the extinction method. I would say Probably only a few of my clients end up wanting to go with this method. I'm personally very comfortable with it, but the next method is where I work the most, and that is the check and console method, which is very similar to the Ferber method. It has a couple key differences, which I'll explain. What I really like about check and console is it's really efficient. So it works very, very quickly because we're giving our children space, but it's a timer-based approach. So there is that opportunity for us to go into our children's room for a very brief check-in if they've been crying for a certain amount of time. One of the differences between check and console and Ferber is that with check and console, the timer's always set to the same amount of time. So for example, if we have a child who's 1 year old, we would do a 15-minute timer. With Ferber, it kind of starts at like 2 minutes, then 4 minutes, 6 minutes, etc. But with check and console, it's always going to be set at 15 minutes because that's an age-appropriate amount of time and it's easy for you to remember. So if you're doing this in the middle of the night, you don't have to remember what time you were at last. It's always the same. It's very simple to remember. So the way it works is you do your really solid bedtime routine, and we'll talk about routines in a bit as well. You do your bedtime routine, you lay your child down, whether it's in their crib or in their bed. You say, "Sweet dreams, I love you, good night," and you turn on their white noise and you leave. And at that time, you've closed the door, you're standing outside of the room, or you're on the couch with the monitor and your timer on your phone. And you set your timer for 15 minutes and you're watching what your child's doing. If you see that their level of cry has decreased at all, whether to a whine, a softer cry, maybe they paused, we're also going to pause the timer at this time. The reason we do that is we don't want you to go in for our check-in prematurely because it can be very stimulating to them, especially when we're not responding the way that they're used to, like picking them up or sleeping next to them. So we want to give them that space to try, especially if they're showing signs of trying already. But if we do get to that 15 minutes of the consistent crying, that's when we go for our check-in. And the check-in is super quick, 15 seconds. It's, "I love you, sweet dreams, it's time for sleep." If your child's in the crib, you can lay them back down. If your child is on the floor and you want to put them back in their bed, you go back to the bed, tuck them in, and then you leave again and you restart the process. And we do that until they fall asleep. And it's really efficient. It does work really, really well, but it has that plan for parents to go in if they need, which makes parents feel way more comfortable going into the process. So I would say that is my number one recommendation for a method because it has that really good balance there. Just to touch on some of the other methods, and these are specific to a baby or child in a crib, and I'll touch on other methods that we can do with a child who's in a bed, because I'm sure that's definitely a topic that we'll want to discuss tonight. There's the chair method, which you can use for a child in a crib, actually, or for a bed. And that is the process of moving a chair or basically your spot from next to the crib or bed to the middle of the room to the doorway and ultimately in the hall. And you do that every couple of nights and you will role play before each time you do that and show them exactly where you're going to be. So there's no surprises, which helps take out some of that anxiety for your children. I don't usually do this because it takes a long time. And eventually you have to pivot to check and console once you're out in the hallway anyway. You're out in the hallway, maybe they can verbally hear you, but they don't see you. And then you end up pivoting to check and console. So I usually just go up front with check and console because when my clients come to me, they want to see results and they want to see them quickly. They're tired. So we do a method that feels sustainable, but is going to get them those results quickly. Of course, there's other methods that you could do, like shush pat, which is, like patting your child to sleep. I don't love this for a child 1+ because it's just not really necessary. It's, I think, maybe more stimulating than it is for a baby, but that's an option as well. I will touch on, like I said, a method that we do for children in a bed. And a lot of problems that we see here are when a child is coming out of their bed. And we're going to talk about troubleshooting tonight as well. But just to touch on that method, it is called silent return. The way that works is our child is getting up, they're leaving the room, we're bringing them right back. And what we're doing is we're taking out the negotiation, taking out the excitement from the process of trying to get them into their bed, because most parents are trying to negotiate with them. They're having conversations. It's, even though maybe feeling not so great to the child, it's exciting because they're getting that interaction that they want. So what we're doing is we're removing all of that. We take our child, we walk them back to their room. We have a sleep mantra, such as, I love you, it's time for sleep, good night, I'll see you in the morning. And you bring them right back to their room, tuck them in, and you leave again. And if your child comes out, you do the exact same thing. And you keep doing that over and over. After the first couple nights, we might move to do something where we send them back to their room on their own. If they have a tantrum, we have a mantra for what that tantrum is. We could say you have two choices. You can have your tantrum and then go to your room, or you can take some deep breaths and go to your room. And again, it totally takes the excitement out. And I know it sounds unbelievable that this could work, but I have seen it in practice. It really, truly does. So the other, I'll talk about how extinction works with children who are in a bed as well. This is where you could use a physical barrier, and it doesn't really have to always be extinction, but using a lock on the door. So some parents will turn the doorknob around, which locks from the outside, so it's safe. So you control the lock, but of course your child can't exit. This I do think is actually, even though it can sound extreme, I do think it's actually valuable and safer for younger children who we don't want roaming around the house at night, because who wants a 2-year-old to have free access to the house at 2 in the morning when everyone else is sleeping? So it actually can be, even though it might feel extreme, it actually is the safest choice because your child should be safely in their room where everything is baby proofed. There's also things like the monkey lock, which is a lock that it kind of hinges the door open, so it only opens like an inch or two. And if anyone's interested, I could share a link to that. But that's another great method with a physical barrier because your child can't leave, but the door opens a little bit. If your child is good at opening the door themselves, but not great at using a child-proof doorknob, you can just slip one of those on and then they can't, they might try, but they can't get out. So physical barriers are okay, and they definitely do accelerate the process. And like I said, they can feel extreme in the moment, but it's about safety. So if you're considering it, it is definitely an okay option and something that I do support and work with my clients on. So we don't have any open questions, so I'm going to move on to scheduling. So this is a little bit different than when I talk about this with babies because of course, babies are way more sensitive to different wake windows, but when we're working with a child ages 1+, they might be napping, they might not. So what I've given you here is a little guide of general sleep expectations for a child 1+ in a 24-hour period. So what's really important here is if your child is napping, it's balancing that day and night sleep. So let's say that your 2-year-old is only napping, let's say, an hour and a half during the day. We can then expect them to sleep 10.5 to 11 hours at night. We're not getting that 7 to 7 stretch then if we're holding on to that nap, which you should. A 2-year-old should still be napping. I usually see the nap dropped around ages 3 to 4, some earlier, some a little bit younger, some you have to force off of the nap, but it's really important to balance that day and night sleep so that your expectations are in line. A lot of the times when I hear from families, their children are waking up really early in the morning, it's because they're still napping for 3 hours a day and then they're being put to bed at 7 p.m. So we really want to have those expectations set so that we can manage our children's schedules accordingly. So there's this guide here for you if you have any questions. Definitely drop those here. I know it can get a little bit more nuanced depending on how old your child is, but this is a really helpful guide. And I will be circulating a sleep chart after this with Concierge, so you have access to that as well. But if you have any specific scheduling questions, definitely let me know. We have a question here actually. How do I keep my 3-year-old from waking up in the middle of the night multiple times? She gets out of bed and stands by the gate and cries, walks back to the bed without talking but constant wake-ups. So, okay, so we're going to talk about troubleshooting in a little bit, but since that question came in, let's talk about it. So, like I said, we're going to be doing a lot of preparation up front. And I say the most important parts of sleep training a child around this age is one, preparation, and two, consistency. A lot of the times that I see parents not succeeding with sleep training is because we give in too quickly. If we're explaining to our children that we're doing one thing and then our actions don't match it, they get very confused. And then they also don't always believe what we're saying we're going to do. So we need our children to trust that our words and our actions are going to match. So by doing a combination of the role playing, showing your children exactly what you're going to be doing at bedtime, middle of the nights, mornings, and then really following through with that with your chosen method, it really helps. And stick with it. It's not a one night and done thing. It's something you have to work on because if you have a 3-year-old, maybe they weren't doing this as a baby, but I suspect they've been doing this for a little bit of time. And habits can take time to break and change. So we need to put the time in to allow our children to relearn how to sleep on their own. I hope that answers the question, but please do follow up if you need more context there. So let's move on to sleep associations. So this is one of my favorite topics because there are really positive sleep associations, and then there's not such positive sleep associations, which is what we call negative sleep associations or sleep prompts. So let's start with the good. Routines. First, I love routines. Children and babies thrive on consistency. So when you're sleep training your child, the first thing I do is say, set up a really solid bedtime routine. It does not need to be an hour or 90 minutes. It does not need to include 6 books, but it needs to be enough time where your child, one, has time to wind down, two, it's consistent that it cues them for sleep, and three, they feel that connection with you before bed. So they're not left wanting more. They feel really filled up before you let them have their space to be on their own to fall asleep. So have that routine for bed. Have that routine. It can be super short for nap, but keep it the same every day. It can be, a bath, diaper, potty, lotion, pajamas, book, one or two, a song, then in their crib or bed, sweet dreams, I love you, good night, white noise, and you're out. So I say around 20 to 40 minutes for a bedtime routine, depending on what works for your family, your child, if they require a little bit more time to wind down. And a nap routine could be like 2 minutes, maybe 5, but it doesn't need to be long at all. It could be potty, book, song, in their crib and bed. So that's my first suggestion. I really actually suggest that families do this from newborn stage. It's really helpful in establishing healthy sleep habits. So the next one is white noise. And I know this can be polarizing, and there's a lot out there, or noise, for lack of a better word, on the internet about if white noise is healthy. And the truth is that it is. It is a great cue for children that it's time for sleep, but it also drowns out a lot of the noise. So if you have, you're going to be awake for another couple hours doing something with your significant other, and you don't want them to hear that, white noise. If it's nap time and the gardener's outside, white noise. That really helps. So as long as your noise machine is far enough from your child and not at a crazy volume, it's okay. And you should definitely use it. I love it. I use it myself. It helps me sleep. So it's normal that it helps a child sleep as well. Darkness. So this isn't as important as it is for a baby who's super distracted and having trouble with short naps, but it's still really helpful because I don't know about you, but I prefer to sleep in a dark room. So darkness is really helpful. It again is a visual cue that sleep is coming, and it's way easier to sleep in a dark space than it is a light space. So now let's talk negative sleep associations. The first is rocking or bouncing to sleep. So that is when we put our child down already asleep, or we're, rubbing their back until they fall asleep. So they're requiring us to put them to sleep in a way. Of course, the reason that this is not a great sleep association is because they're relying on us. And when they wake up a little bit later into the night, they're looking for that assistance when they wake up. And if we're not there, they're going to be upset. So we want them to feel confident and have the tools to put themselves to sleep. Feeding to sleep, this is really just for the families who on here who have children closer to ages 1. If you're still using a bottle, that's fine. But if you're using it as a prop to fall asleep, we definitely want to cut that, especially if your child's older and has teeth. I assume you're not going to be brushing teeth after you've already fed them to sleep. And that's not great for their dental health, in addition to their sleep habits. So definitely want to cut that feed to sleep association. The last and most common with children of this age is parent presence. So a lot of our children do expect us to help them fall asleep if that's what we've been doing. And you could be doing it for 2 nights and then that becomes an expectation. So if your child is asking you to sit next to them, rub their back to sleep, sleep next to them, sleep in their bed, sleep in your bed, they again are reliant on us to help them sleep. And that's what we want to fix with sleep training. So again, I don't see any open questions here, so I will move on to the part that is probably the most interesting, troubleshooting. So this is where, we talk about the actual issues that we're seeing with sleep. So the first that we'll talk about is crib to bed. And I know there were some questions that were submitted before, and we'll definitely touch on them specifically towards the end, but some of them were about the crib to bed transition. I usually see this happen between ages 3 to 4. There is no reason for you to rush this transition. Try really hard to block out that noise of peer pressure when you hear all the other parents talking about transitioning to beds, because if they do it too early, if you do it too early, it might backfire. You want to keep your child safely in their crib until they're climbing, and then it's a safety risk, or they're getting closer to age 4, or they're really just too big for their crib. I certainly didn't have that issue with my 4-year-old. He's on the smaller side. So we waited until his 4th birthday, and it was something that became exciting for him that he got to get his big boy bed when he became 4. So if you're going through that transition or you're preparing for it, hype it up. Make it something really exciting for them. It's a privilege. It's something they can be excited about. We don't talk about things like stay in your bed, don't get up till mommy or daddy come get you, because a lot of children actually, if they've been in their crib, don't even realize they can get out. Of course, if they're climbing, that might be different. But if they aren't and you're just taking them out because it's age appropriate, then I wouldn't call too much attention to it. You can have the red light, green light, which you might be familiar with from Instagram, or if you have the Hatch. It is really helpful. It's not the immediate solve for keeping your children in their bed, but it is a nice ingredient to add in when you're working on this. If you have any specific questions about the crib to bed transition, we can talk about it. But specifically with your children staying in their bed, that's the issue that I see most often with this age group. And it could be linked to many things, but usually it's just that your children don't have the confidence to sleep, and that's okay. It's very normal, it's very common, and it's also very, very fixable. So if you're experiencing any issues with your child not wanting to stay in their bed at bedtime, waking up in the middle of the night and ending up in your bed, or waking up at 5 in the morning, what we really want to do is follow those steps that we talked about, which is sitting them down for a family meeting, doing the role playing and showing them what they're supposed to be doing and what they're not supposed to be doing. And then we get people around us involved to help them celebrate. If they love FaceTiming grandma, FaceTime grandma and say, we just taught, I'll use my son Luke. We just taught Luke that he's going to be staying in his bed all night. We're so excited to call you together tomorrow and tell you when Luke stays in his bed all night. We're going to have a dance party over FaceTime. And then Luke will be very excited to call grandma the next day and tell her the good news. So use all these things to your advantage. Something I think someone asked about, I'm not sure, but it's a very common question, is when your child is stalling before bed. So that could be, again, there could be many causes, but usually it's because children of this age are just exploring their newfound abilities to stall, to have power and control. Something that I really like to do is create a routine chart for our children. So that can be an activity you do together, and it's a really nice opportunity for bonding. So you have this routine that you're going to pre-negotiate with your child. You sit down and you write it out together on a whiteboard or just a simple piece of paper and agree, are we going to do book or song first? How many books? You say three? Okay, I think two. Let's do two. We could even pick them out now. And then at night, you together cross it off, and it feels very interactive. It feels like your child had a say, so they feel that control, but you're also giving power to this routine chart. And it becomes less of a battle between parent and child and more of child having to answer to this routine chart. So it's really helpful. And I do find that it works really, really well. You don't have to get one of those fancy ones. There are beautiful ones out there. But if you just want to keep it simple, you can just write it right out and use a marker to cross it out at night. So let's talk fears and anxiety. So this can feel more stressful because, of course, you don't want your child to be in distress when they're trying to sleep. I'll keep it simple here, but what I like to do with, a child who's having nightmares or is telling us they're afraid of the dark is first we acknowledge it and we say, that must feel really hard. I understand that sometimes that can feel scary, but then we kind of take the power away from that fear and tell them there's nothing to be afraid of. Your room is so safe. I would never have you sleep somewhere that wasn't safe. You have a beautiful room. Look at that adorable stuffed animal. Look at those fun sheets you have. It is such a special place. There's nothing to be afraid of. And you know what you can do when you go to sleep? Lay down, close your eyes, or you don't have to close your eyes. Think about rainbows, puppies, Batman, whatever your child likes, give them positive things to think about. And it really helps to, acknowledging it so we're not belittling their fears, but we're also moving it into a positive direction. One thing that I do suggest that we avoid is leaving the door open because your child's saying, I'm scared to have the door closed, or looking under the bed for monsters. Because if we're telling them there's nothing to be afraid of, but then we look under the bed or keep the door open, our child's like, but you said there was nothing to be afraid of, yet you're doing the thing that I asked you to do. So we don't want to confuse them and also look for something that we are telling them is not there. So I would avoid monster spray, looking for monsters, and definitely avoid keeping the door open because, again, that's just like a power struggle, and you need to be the one that's making that mommy or daddy decision that the door stays closed at bedtime. Moving on to early morning wakes, which I think is probably one of the most difficult for parents because we're so tired early in the morning and really need those extra 1 or 2 hours of sleep. So usually I'll say this is probably either schedule related or lacking confidence or boundaries around sleep. So scheduling, go back to what I shared earlier about, what's a reasonable expectation for your child to be sleeping. So let's say your child again is 2 and they are waking up at 5 in the morning, they're sleeping for 3 hours, cap that nap for an hour and a half, and then you get that hour and a half pushed over into bedtime. And then all of a sudden they're waking up at 6:30. And of course, it's not as easy as that. It takes time, but making those schedule shifts helps. And yeah, you might have a later bedtime than you want, or you might have to end up dropping the nap and then you unfortunately don't get that break in the day. But that's when we move to something like quiet time. And quiet time is a beautiful thing because we're still giving our children the opportunity to rest. It gives you a little bit of a break, and it's a really valuable time for them to, be on their own, play quietly. They're not watching TV, they're not with you. They still have that time to rest. And especially when they're going through that nap transition, it can be really helpful. If they still seem to need that nap, they might fall asleep, and that's okay. But we want to give them that space and that opportunity. So, quiet time is really helpful. And if you have any questions on that, definitely let me know. I'm a big, big fan. So early morning wakes, probably schedule related or again, boundaries. And the boundaries is really what comes with being super consistent with our sleep training methods and doing that whole preparation process, implementing the sleep training method really, really consistently, and making sure our words and actions match up. Using that red light, green light. If you have the hatch, I really love it because you can operate it remotely from your phone. So let's say your child wakes up at 5:30 and you see them sitting up and looking around and wanting to get up. If it doesn't look like they're going to go back to sleep and you were hoping they were going to sleep till 7, turn the light green at 6. They don't know what time it is, but what they do know is when you go into their room and you say, "You made it until the light was green. We're so proud of you." Big celebrations, calling grandma to tell her. That's very exciting. And they don't know that they didn't make it the extra hour. You can inch closer to there, but they then get that positive reinforcement that they made it to that time. So, love the hatch, do love the red light, green light, but it's really important to establish those confident, positive, healthy sleep habits up front. Middle of the night wakes, which I know we just had a question on that. Again, look at your schedules, make sure that you are responding in the way that you said you would during the role playing in your family meeting. Make sure that you're not, I've had clients who are like, "I'm just going to offer a little bit of milk in the middle of the night." If you're doing that, that is an accidental positive reinforcement because our child is saying, "Well, I'm just going to get this little bit of milk and this time to hang out with mom or dad. So I'm going to keep waking up." And there's nothing wrong with that for me. So we need to take away, again, any of that excitement, make sure that we are, you know, enforcing our boundaries. And, a good way to look at it is like a loving but respectful boundary. And it's okay for us to have those as parents. I tell parents a lot to look at it this way. If we are having a hard time wrapping our head around being more firm with our boundaries around sleep. Most of you probably have children in school. If your child is crying because they're separating from you at school and they're in their classroom, they're with their teacher and they're crying, saying, "I want mom or dad to come back." Are we going to go back into their classroom and stay with them during the day just because they cried for us? No. We're not going to do that because we know that school is the right place that they're supposed to be. They're safe there. That's where they're meant to be. The same applies for sleep. And I'm not 100% sure why it doesn't always connect in that way, but I do think when I give an analogy like that, parents understand. And sleep in their room is where they're supposed to be. So allow your child to learn that's where they're meant to be and give them that confidence to stay there. Just to touch on the last few things that I have listed here, illness, teething, and travel. When your child is sick, my whole rule book goes out the window. So your child, if they have anything really beyond a cold, a cough, a sniffle, they have a fever or a stomach bug, you want to give them that extra comfort to help them sleep because they need sleep to get better. So if they need you to give them extra snuggles, they need that bedtime routine to be longer. They need to be put down even drowsy instead of fully awake. That's okay. I would say try not to jump all the way to like bringing them into your bed. Try other things first. Add in that comfort and that presence a little bit at a time. If you ultimately end up with your child in your bed, it happens. It happened for me the first time a few months ago. It's okay. But what I suggest is as soon as your child starts getting better, go right back to your healthy sleep routines. Because if we linger, our children get used to that and then they expect it. So once the illness is starting to go away, sleep goes right back to normal. But until then, offer extra comfort as needed. Teething, I don't find it heavily impacts sleep. I think us as parents, and I say this very much from my own situation, blame everything on teething. Like they're fussy, oh, they must be teething, or he doesn't want to eat, he must be teething. Children are getting teeth all the way from like babyhood to 2+. So they could always be teething, and we never really know if they're teething until that tooth pops out. So of course, ask your doctor if they're comfortable with you giving Motrin, Tylenol before bed. Give it to them. They might be a little fussier going down, but it doesn't heavily impact sleep. And there are studies that actually show it should not. So don't worry too much about teething. Travel, there's a lot to this, of course. There's the element of being in a different sleep environment and being unfamiliar. And that's normal. I don't always sleep as well in a new place as I do in my own bed at home. And your child probably won't either. So it's okay if they need, again, a little extra comfort when they're in a new place. Bring as much as you can from home, the same blanket, sound machine, favorite book, so that there's familiar objects from their sleep routine so that it does feel homey to them when you're away. Then, of course, there's the elements of your routine and schedule getting totally off, or you're on a totally different time zone. And in that case, what I like to suggest, and we could talk about this for a long time, we could do a whole webinar on this, but for switching to a new time zone, try and get onto that new time zone as quickly as you can. Even meet somewhere in the middle. If you're there for 3+ days, you're not going to want to operate as if you're 3 hours ahead or behind. You're going to want to be out at dinner at a normal time. So do your best to push your child like you're pushing yourself, and they do get used to it quite quickly. But of course, if you need to put them to bed a little earlier, let them sleep in a little bit more, that's okay too. Just do your best to get to that time of day on the clock. The same actually goes for daylight savings time, in my opinion. I think it's way overhyped in terms of preparation. It's coming up soon. Don't do anything leading up. Again, just get to that new time on the clock the next day. It might take a couple of days for your child to adjust, just like it takes time for us to adjust, but they will. And it's really not as big of a deal as I think it's made out to be. Okay, so I think that's everything here for our topic. So now, if anyone has any questions, would love to get to those.
While we wait for everything to drop into the Q&A, I know that some people submitted in advance, so I'm happy to help deliver those questions to you, Spenser. First
Amazing.
of all, thank you. This was really interesting. There was so much information. I'm sure everyone's eager for the sleep chart. And Spenser, if you're okay with that, I think we can email that to everyone directly with the recording tomorrow. Does
Yeah,
that work for you?
yeah,
Great.
definitely.
All right. If we've still got some time, let's go through these questions. I know a few of these were covered during your presentation, but if you're okay with it, I think we'll just touch upon them again since they
Yeah,
were submitted directly.
perfect.
All right. First one. How can I help my child to fall asleep independently?
That is a great question. So, what we're doing is teaching our children to do this on their own. So, we're removing ourselves from this process a lot. We're setting them up for success by preparing them in advance, by doing those family meetings, that role playing, and then picking a method that feels attainable and sustainable with your parenting style. So if it's something that's, more on the gradual side, even if I'm telling you that it's not something that I typically do with my clients, if that feels more right to you, then that's what you should do. You have to listen to your gut and like what feels right with your child and how you like to parent. So choose a method that feels good to you and then stick with it, because our children, just as I said, they thrive on consistency with routines. They really thrive when we're being consistent to our word as well. So give them all of those tools up front and then really follow through with it. If we're consistent on our end, we see success. Our children, they need that guidance from us in order to help lead them there. And then they take it the rest of the way. We just need to give them the tools to do that.
Right on. I think you covered this one, but let's touch upon it anyway. My daughter wakes up and cries until we come get her at 7. How can we avoid the early morning wake ups between 5:30 and 6 a.m.?
Such a hard time of day. We all wish we were sleeping then, and it's so hard when you're, in dreamland and you hear that scream for mom, dad at 5:30 in the morning. So it's great. I'll say to start off, great that you're waiting until 7. Like, not a lot of people can do that. So you should give yourself a pat on the back that you've been doing that, because that's the first thing that I say is try and hold out as long as you can to your desired wake time to go in there, because if we go in there earlier and we start their day, then we're reinforcing that. So again, going back to that red light, green light, that role playing, talk to them about how they haven't been able to stretch all the way till 7 and stay in their bed quietly. Ask them why that is. look at your schedule. Are they napping during the day? Are they going to bed too early? Are you still aiming for that 12-hour stretch, but maybe it's more realistic for them to be having 11 hours at this stage? Take a look at all of that and really look at it holistically. Sorry, there's an alarm going off here. Not in my house. And then, look at it all together and then plan to explain that to your child accordingly and then follow through with those steps consistently.
Let's touch upon delays again. I have my 2.5-year-old was a great sleeper. Now delays going down, wakes up in the middle of the night. What changed and how do I fix that?
Sure. So it could be multiple things. Sometimes I see it with your child got sick, or there was a big change in their family, or, a sibling comes, or your child is newly going to school and has separation anxiety, or it could just be a developmental change where they are noticing more that they have that ability to negotiate and have that power to extend bedtime. So it could be many different things. And it's very, very common for children to stall and negotiate. Like my 4-year-old did it tonight, but it's about being firm and saying, nope, we agreed on this already. This is our bedtime routine. Let's do this tomorrow. Keep it positive. We don't want to be like reprimanding our children or scolding them or anything negative during sleep. We want to keep it positive, keep it patient, do those pre-negotiations for your bedtime routine and stick with it. Don't give in to those extra books or extra visits to the potty. If they've already gone, they're good to go. So, put them in their bed.
So if they're not delaying, what if they're waking up in the middle of the night? We have a 21-month old. They've been sleeping through the night since 8 weeks old, but now they're getting up in the middle of the night. What to do?
So there is a regression around 1.5. So I'm not sure how long this parent has been going through this, but a lot of times I see around this age, there's a lot that our children are going through. So they either have, gone through like a huge verbal explosion or separation anxiety might be peaking. They just have a lot more abilities and they're aware of so much more and aware of so much more they can do. So oftentimes I find sleep gets impacted when there's a developmental change, which is what a regression is known as. Um, and with our toddlers, they have way more stamina than they did as babies. So these regressions feel much bigger and harder because they have words and they can last a lot longer. So I would look at how you're responding to these wake ups. I would try to give your child space. If, they're waking up and they're just calling for us, let them be. If they're crying for, 15 minutes, go for your check-in and say, I'm here, I love you, but it's time for sleep. I'll see you in the morning and leave again. And, again, you can choose a method that feels right to you. Check and console does seem to be like very sustainable for a lot of parents, especially when they see results really quickly. So, if you want more details on how that works, definitely let me know. But again, make sure that you're responding in a way that is not too exciting for your child, whether that's like you're taking them out or you're just having a conversation with them. They're going to expect those things ultimately when we do it over and over again. So keep it quiet, keep it brief, keep it consistent.
Sort of reminds me of an old episode of Full House where they were trying to keep Michelle in bed. And they said nothing exciting happens after you go to bed. And she was up one night and everything exciting happened. So that's a good old school episode to keep it
I,
with. Keep it unexciting or they're going to
I
love
love a
being up.
good love a good 90s
Yeah,
TV show callback.
right? Everyone go watch that tonight as your homework. All right, last call for the Q&A. While we get to this last question that was submitted in advance, can you share your tips from transitioning from the crib to the toddler bed and how to keep them from coming into your room?
Yeah, there's so much to this. The crib to toddler bed is very scary to some parents, which is totally reasonable. Like as a sleep consultant, I did this a few months ago and I wasn't even sure how it was going to go. You never really know. You can only control what you can control. So focus on those things that you can set up for the best success possible. And then if your child has some issues or bumps, then we tackle those. The way I like to set up this transition is again, don't do it too early. If your child is not jumping out of their crib, wait until they're a little bit older. At closer to 4 is great. Again, unless they're huge and they need to come out, wait. Once it's time or it's approaching to be that time, talk about it with them. Tell them when you're this age, or maybe it's Christmas or Hanukkah, you're getting your big boy, big girl bed. We're so excited. Oh, did you hear like your neighbor has this? Like, let's go look at it and, show them what it looks like. Tell them how exciting it is. And it should be an exciting new privilege that they get. So keep it really exciting. And then once you do that, once you build it and you have it, show it to them. Let them, give them a little new bedroom tour. Let them see it before they're getting into their bed for the first night at bedtime so they can really see it in the daytime and get comfortable. They might the first night kind of just like lay there looking around, like my child did, being like, why are there no walls around me? But they'll fall asleep, they'll get there. If your child was not climbing out of their crib, it's very, very possible. Like I said, they don't realize that they can. So I wouldn't stress to them, stay in your bed, because they really might not realize that there's an option to get out. I do experience a lot of times, again, with my own child, not to call back to him too much, but in the beginning, his stuffed animal would fall out of his bed and he would cry for me because he didn't realize he could go get it himself. And I see that a lot with children who do have really good sleep foundations that they just don't realize they have this newfound freedom. So I would say don't stress too much upfront if your child isn't showing like those rebellious sides of getting out of their bed or their crib. If they are, that's when again we do the role playing and we show them exactly what they're supposed to be doing during sleep and what we're going to do if they get out of their bed. And that's when we show them how the sleep training method works. So if it's check-in console and you're going to be checking on them every 10 minutes, again, say, oh, I think I hear Dolly's crying. Let's set our timer. We're going to come in when they've been crying for a little bit because we want them to know mom or dad always come back, but she knows she's supposed to go to sleep because sleep is the best thing for her and it's going to make her body feel so good. And then you do the check-in with them. And then, you can go to early mornings and say, the light's still red, but I think Dolly's awake. Do you think she's going to come out? No, she's not going to come out. She knows to stay there until the light's green. Show them all of these things, talk it through with them so it's not a surprise that first night. It might, the first night might be perfect. It might be disastrous. It might be somewhere in between. But even if it's at the very end of the spectrum where it just really didn't go according to plan, it's all fixable with the right technique and the consistency.
A tough one in the Q&A from Hallie. She says, I'll do a check in the middle of the night once they cry and leave. And 5 minutes later, my 16-month-old starts screaming, crying again. This becomes cyclical throughout the night until morning. Any thoughts on that?
I'm reading it as well, just to make sure I got the times and the ages down. So, okay. So I would say first, look at how your child is falling asleep. Are they falling asleep completely independently? If they're not, they should be falling asleep 100% on their own, not drowsy, not assisted in any way. So that's the first thing I would say. If they are falling asleep independently, look at your schedule. So has your child dropped to one nap yet? If they haven't, it might be time to make that change. If they're already on one nap, maybe they need more sleep pressure before or after that nap. And again, this sleep chart will show you some of that. So, and you can also message me separately. I'm happy to share a sample schedule specific to your child. But look at all of those things with your schedule. 16 months is in that window also where that 18-month sleep regression could hit. It's called an 18-month sleep regression, but really it's like, it could happen at 15 months. It could happen at 19 months. It could really around that 1.5 time. But I usually see it linked to a verbal explosion. So maybe you notice that your child is talking a lot more. If it's the regression, the only true answer is to just like move through it, sleep train, and they will get through it quickly. But if it's not that, and it's something that might be schedule related or how you're responding, those are things that we can fix on our end. If it's the regression, we just need to give it time and again, consistent with how we approach and respond with our check-ins. Also, I would say look at your check-ins. If your check-ins are really quick, great. If you're lingering a little bit, get out of the room quickly because, it makes it harder also for your child if you're just, hanging out in there, but then we ultimately leave. So keep it quick, 15 seconds, get out, start your timer again, give your child some space and see if that helps.
Great. I think that covers our Q&A. I think you've
Okay.
covered it all. So thank
I
you so
hope
much for your
so.
insights. Thank you to everyone here who's taken the time out of your busy fall schedules to join us tonight. Spenser, I also just want to say that we're so grateful at Concierge Pediatrics to have you as an extension of our team and as an expert resource for our members and beyond to the public. We're so happy that you were able to do this tonight and last night. We're hoping for many more with you. And for everyone who joined, we hope the information you got on tonight's webinar will be something that you can implement into your routines right away. If you want to stay connected to Spenser, you can follow her on Instagram at mysleepfriend, or you can visit her website at mysleepfriend.co. Spenser, any other social media or areas of touch points that I haven't covered?
That's it. Like, as Megan said, if you ever want to come meet in person, I am at Concierge Pediatrics in Roslyn the first Friday of every month. So you can meet me there. I am also regularly in my DMs. I said this last night. It's not maybe the smartest business decision, but I love giving out advice for free. So slide into my DMs if you have a question. I always love chatting with you. It was so nice to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me. Really nice to chat with you guys. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help. I hope you all have a great night's sleep tonight and lots of good sleeps ahead of you.
So you really are a sleep friend for sure,
I
especially in those DMs. All right, everybody. After we close out this webinar, you're going to see a survey pop up on your screen. It would mean so much to all of us if you could just take 1 minute and leave some feedback for us. We want to continue these types of events and make them useful and meaningful to you. So your commentary is really important to us. And with that, I will say thank you and have a good night.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.